Welcome to my channel Cella Buzz. Is it not unbelievable? As word got out, it appeared as though the planet held its breath. Francis, the Pope, was dead. However, what followed left humanity in disbelief, frozen to the bone, unable to speak. Only 5 days following his passing, the spiritual, the head of more than 1 billion devoted followers, was buried at a funeral that was so terribly straightforward, it ripped through millennia of Vatican custom. Not a lot of fancy rituals, no elaborate processions, only a simple wooden coffin and an enigmatic murmur reverberating over the globe. Why? Why would the head of the world church decide to go like a ghost? What is false? Why this humility? A horrifying plot. A forecast that rocked the Vatican to its core? Letters that were sealed disappeared from the desk of Francis. Coded instructions spread like a wildfire. Then a Cardinal Luis's shocking disclosure. Antonio Tagle is the individual who could now keep the church's destiny in his hands. What is it that he knows? What might could it possible leave the globe wondering? Did Francis really abandon us? Or is he directing us from outside? Get ready. This secret will have you gasping for air, and here, everything will be made clear. Everyone watches. In the freezing shadow of Rome at dusk, the Vatican was hidden in an unsettling silence, as though the whole world had stopped talking. Francis, the Pope's spiritual guide to over 1 billion people's souls, had vanished. However, nobody anticipated what happened next. After only 5 days, he was laid to rest in a ceremony so bleak that appeared to question all sacred custom of the church. There were no glittering during 9 days of grief gold, no elaborate parades, just a silent prayer, a wooden coffin, an inquiry that rang louder than any sermon. Why? Why would a man formerly at the ultimate peak of clerical power, Chosetto, depart like this? The answer lies not alone in his modesty, but in a secret. The Vatican itself has been disturbed by that, a mystery that even the most devoted cardinals hardly mention anything without trembling. As soon as Jorge Mario Bergoglio shocked everyone by becoming Pope Francis, the entire world, he turned down the throne, deciding to live in a little space at the rather than the Santa Marta guest house magnificent apostolic residence. His garments were not gold embroidered. His footwear were scuffed from wear at the heels, traversing impoverished areas. Regarding Francis, power was not the goal of leadership. It was regarding assistance. I'd rather not be exalted, he once spoke softly, to a close assistant, but resolute. I want the church to keep in mind, people are the reason we are here, not splendor. That spirit influenced his ultimate want, a funeral devoid of fanfare, no lavishness, only a brief instance of pure prayer. However, underneath that simplicity is a mystery awaiting discovery, on merely a small number of people in the Vatican, and even by those who fear them. Easter Sunday of that year, Francis made an appearance on St. Peter's Square for good. The audience applauded, but his closest friends felt that something wasn't right. His palms, he lifted them in blessing, and they shuddered. There was too much sadness in his smile foremarks, as though he could see into the future itself. His remarks were startlingly succinct, merely a few sentences urging peace in Ukraine and Gaza. No lengthy sermon, no eloquence, a straightforward statement that left its mark on everyone's heart. Ask for serenity in your prayers. Later, witnesses stated that he'd made numerous revisions to the speech, tearing up pages as if attempting to condense a lifetime into a few sentences. Beside him, one cardinal was standing on, whispered to a co-worker from the balcony. I believe he's saying goodbye. Following the burial, Francis vacillantly returned to his humble apartment. He didn't make a phone call and consult a physician or call in high-ranking officials. Rather, he asked for a straightforward dinner with his longtime secretary and nurse. Around an antique wooden table, they sat, sharing inexpensive wine and bread as Argentine tunes from his early years gently played from a shabby record participant. I want to remember this way. My life, he murmured, his eyes as bright as someone who had discovered tranquilly. Approximately 8:12 p.m., he requested his confessor in private. Nobody is certain of what was spoken behind the closed door, yet the priest's look when he came out was, his hands were shaking and he appeared pallid. He had seen something that went beyond understanding. It was already midnight when Francis murmured while looking into his assistant's eyes, effortless, I'm prepared. No hospital, except the tiny space where there are no machines. He had spent so much time in prayer, labor, and life. Many years. The nurse discovered him around morning, resting there with a contented grin on his face, as though he had just had a conversation with God. However, Francis's true motivation for insisting on a quick funeral wasn't only a sign of humility. He penned a letter in his last days, entrusted with a tightly sealed document, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle alone, seen as a front-runner for the upcoming pope. Rumor has it that Vatican hallways, the letter said, not just his condolences but also a prophecy, an alert for an impending storm that might rock the church to its foundations. Some claim Francis anticipated a significant rift, simmering inside the Vatican, a conflict between those who are holding on to tradition and those who want change. He was aware that his passing may start that strain, and he decided on a hasty funeral to stop his funeral from turning into a political battleground. However, the detail that stunned everyone was contained in the letter. Francis asked to be interred at the St. Mary's Basilica Major, not merely to be nearer the individuals, but because he thought that site would eventually become the focal point of a miracle from God. People who know him well say, Francis once saw St. Mary Major in a dream, radiating heavenly brightness as though God had decided to use it to communicate with humanity. As he explained to Tagle, if the church wished to endure the impending storm, it had to begin hearing the voices of the forgotten, the impoverished, the particular individuals to whom he had dedicated his life serving. As per a confidential source, a line at the end of the letter Tagle was moved to tears when he go through it. When there is division in the world, let St. Mary Major serves as a gathering spot. Don't let my passing separate you. Instead, be the start of your recovery. That prophecy, which has not yet been made public, the Vatican has been rocked by the public. A few cardinals think that Francis is attempting to influence the church's future from past the grave. Others are afraid of the letter's secrets could be revealed. Centuries-old foundations. The burial day came, and hush fell over Rome. No never-ending processions. No hymns resonating. Only a wooden coffin transported through confined streets, in the middle of thousands of sobbing people praying and holding candles in the silence of grief. When the casket was buried in St. Mary Major, an odd wind gust blew through the basilica, with each flame flickering candle. Some said it was a sign in whispers, evidence that the spirit of Francis was still in the present. Cardinal Tagle was positioned at Thessalim and said just one sentence. He did not wish for us to grieve for him. He desired to emulate his way of life. However, as he turned distance, an enigmatic blast of light departing the crowd from the tomb startled. Is this the initial indication of Francis's miracle anticipated? Francis's last night at the Vatican was a serene, eerie place. Picture. In his modest flat, he gathered at a rustic wooden table with his longtime secretary and nurse, the individuals who had supported him during many storms. There were no opulent meal, just cheese, bread, and a bottle of inexpensive wine. Songs for children from an ancient age, Argentina played quietly, recording device, returning him to the time Jorge was a young man, from Cyrus Buenos. All I need is this, he continued, his voice silent but profound, as though saying farewell to the world with a grin. But as 8 hours rolled around, the atmosphere changed at p.m. He inquired for the man he personally confessed to entrusted with his spirit. The door closed, behind them, and not for a whole hour. Only one sound came out. As soon as the priest appeared with a ghostly pale face and eyes, crimson with tears, as though he'd seen something that is incomprehensible to humans, he noticed something, the priest said, to assist. But he stopped talking. Close to Francis glanced at the nurse at midnight. I said, "Don't be scared. Everything has been initiated." At the break of day, he was discovered in bed with lips curved, into a calm grin as though he had just said with God. However, that piece was just the surface of a more profound enigma, one that the Vatican would shortly be rocked to its center. As soon as Francis passed away, a flurry of gossip raged through the marble hallways of the Vatican. A sealed Francis himself wrote the envelope, disappeared from his desk. An additional document titled Por él, and written in Spanish future-focused. Futuro also vanished, without being noticed. Employees in his apartment reported a bunch of evasive Vatican representatives came in. Shortly after his death, he carried black briefcases. Something was taken. With a trembling voice, the cleaner whispered. I observed one of them with a pile of documents. One of them appeared to be, I'm going to cry. Sorry spread like wildfire. Was this Francis's last batch of guidelines for the church? A foretelling of the end of the world? Or possibly a message addressing world leaders alerting them about an impending, worldwide disaster? Some even made conjectures. The missing records contained information regarding the actual Vatican. Such perilous truths, they might ruin the church's credibility, if ever exposed. The more in-depth researchers, the more they looked, the more they understood Francis had spent months getting ready to die. He met in secret and departed behind notes that are encrypted. One nearby source disclosed that he had authored dozens of letters, while only a small number were trusted to Cardinal Telle. The others were concealed. Somewhere he alone knew. As anarchy engulfed the Vatican and the external environment burst into a never-before-seen surge of emotion previously. From Nairobi to Buenos Aires, from millions of people traveled from Manila to New York, tow streets adorned with sunflowers and candles, Francis's preferred flower, in recognition of his recall. Argentina's government proclaimed a day of sorrow nationwide. Weeping, voices filled the streets and revered tunes. He was our neighbor and father. In Buenos Aires, a woman broke down. But in the midst of us, the grief surged, bizarre tales started to surface, to proliferate. In Naples, a mother stated her kid who was near death performed a miracle recuperation following her prayer in front of a Francis's picture. In Poland, a collection of, according to pilgrims, the sky was exploding with light as they were concluding their prayers, the rosary in remembrance. Additionally, in a remote, a farmer in a Brazilian community claimed to have seen the picture of Francis in the sun, accompanied by a whispering voice. Don't be scared. Hold on to continuing. These tales spread beyond the local area. On social internet, they became viral with using the hashtags and millions of posts number miracles and St. Francis of Francis. Reporters started referring to it as a wave of spirituality, known as the Francis phenomenon, not to be found in contemporary history. Some started referring to him as St. Francis of the Populace, thinking he had been selected by God to lead people via the gloom. The focus of attention on a worldwide scale is currently the St. Mary Major Basilica, where Francis decided to be buried. In contrast to previous popes, he declined to be interred in the lavish crypts underneath St. Peter's Basilica. Rather, he decided to modest tomb at St. Mary Major, where he might be easily visited by the public. I wish to be in the center of the beats of people, once he said to a cardinal. His tomb, devoid of any gold or valuable stones, has evolved into an everyday pilgrimage, site for thousands of people. They deliver flowers, written letters by hand, as well as murmured St. Mary Major is transformed by prayers into a spiritual lighthouse on fire. However, things that make people shiver, strange events, are the visitors reported from there. Some claim to sense a cozy feeling as you touch the tomb. A Mexican pilgrim reported hearing a loved one, she said softly in her thinking. Another. These rumors have provoked conjecture that Francis not only left behind a heritage, but a radiance of spiritual strength from where he was finally laid to rest. In the meantime, Cardinal Teagle is under increasing strain, Francis's secret letters keeper. He must be released, according to other cardinals. The contents, however, Teagle declines, stating, "The time has not yet come," they said. Some people think the letter has a bold proposal for church reform. Others are afraid it conceals a terrible secret that might cause the Vatican to fall apart. One evening, a Vatican employee claimed to have seen kneeling in front of Francis's tomb, Teagle shedding tears and whispering, "How can I fulfill what I promised you?" That there is a lingering question. Will Teagle either takes the letter or reveals it? The grave secret? Additionally, if it is disclosed, will the church be saved or destroy it? Francis's passing was greater than losing a man. It was the church's seismic challenge itself. Within the Vatican's own, the cardinals have divided into chambers. Two groups. One half is dedicated to protecting Francis's heritage of kindness, modesty, and intimacy with individuals. The other traditionalists mutter about bringing back the previous order, elaborate customs, centralized authority, and spiritual superiority. France has interfered with everything, said a cardinal who wished to remain unnamed, furiously. We require a robust church, not one who bows down and expresses regret to the impoverished. However, outside the marble walls, millions of devotees are demanding the reverse. From Rio de Janeiro's slums, from Janeiro to Uganda's impoverished communities, the people congregate to sing songs and offer prayers for a successor to Francis as Pope spirit forward. In Manila, scores of the streets were overrun by thousands, holding flags, with the words, "Francis persists in us." However, beneath the prayers is a terrifying terror. Should the church change its considering Francis's legacy? Will it endure? In a post-conflict society, inequity and disunity. In the middle, Cardinal Luis stands in the middle of this storm. Antonio Teagle, a beacon of optimism today, and a terrifying figure. In front of the tomb of Francis at St. Mary Major, Teagle disclosed some of the Pope's final message. "Power was never the focus of my life. It had to do with humans. The phrase simple, but profoundly rocked the globe. A reminder. Francis was more than just a religious leader, but a flame that illuminates the way for the forgotten. However, what Tagle didn't disclose and what the other cardinals are afraid of, the entire letter's contents, Francis given to him. Rumor has it that within the Vatican, the document contains more than a blueprint for reform. It has a dreadful warning of impending darkness church season. A private Francis wrote, according to the source, "When you split, Satan comes in. Love is the only thing that can save us." Should the prophecy come to light, it could destroy the shaky partnership between differences inside the Vatican, descending the cathedral into a previously unheard-of spiritual conflict. Tagle's expression is always composed, although his eyes that reveal a storm has turned into the center of interest worldwide. In his native Philippines, the whole anxiety and pride simmer in the nation. Tagle will be the Pope if he is elected. Initially from Asia, a Manila priest announced with obvious enthusiasm. However, that optimism comes with intense terror. Is Tagle resistant to darkness? Forces working together to undermine Francis's heritage? Some people think they're watching him, that the Vatican's authorities are resolved to guarantee Francis's letter never comes into contact with daylight. One evening, a witness claimed to have seen Tagle appear from St. Mary Major with a tiny box, looking pale as though he had recently faced a horrible reality. He appeared to be carrying the witness said, way of the world. Like wildfire, rumors proliferate. The container included an additional Francis piece, an additional document with red text ink that solely contains enigmatic words could comprehend. Some even assert it possesses a map to a hidden archive that Francis concealed rewritable documents. The history of the Church forever. In the meantime, Francis's spiritual craziness does not appear to be slowing down. It's just intensified. From India to Mexico, from South Korea to Nigeria, stories of miracles continue to appear. A blind girl in Kolkata said she saw light after praying for the first time, in the name of Francis. In Seoul, a tiny church stated that a Francis statue broke down in tears on the day of his demise. These incidents have not only inspired belief, they've triggered an extraordinary worldwide movement. Worshippers claiming to be Francis's offspring have surfaced across, calling for the church to give up authority and go back to the underprivileged. Social media hashbach. Francis will always be in charge, with billions of exchanges across continents. However, the movement has also sparked intense divisions. Some refer to it as a revolution of the people. Conservative opinions warning that the Vatican is turning into a fight against custom. One unnamed, even the cardinal said, if we don't reclaim authority, the church will disintegrate within the grasp of zealots. In the midst of the confusion, Tagle's voice roared like a tempest, more profound and potent than anything that it had been decades since the Vatican heard. In unexpected speech in St. Peter's Square, before millions of people both in person and online screens. According to him, Francis does not wish for us to grieve for him. He desires that we to love, forgive, and live like him, rise up for the voiceless. Don't bury his legacy with gold or marble. Let it resides within your hearts. From Rome to Manila, we don't travel from Lagos to Tokyo. Require power. We are mutually dependent. His afresh fire was sparked by words. Charity organizations appeared all over the world. Churches began to open their doors to the homeless. Calm. From the Middle East, movements expanded to East Asia. However, behind the light is a shadow. Tagle is aware of every move he makes is being observed. Additionally, the letter from Francis can be the last or final key, shot in the conflict over the churches, the future. As St. Mary's sun sets, where is Francis's tomb still? Major emits a force that cannot be explained, that the planet is reaching a turning point. Will the church decided to follow the path of love and humility, or allow the darkness to consume you, of authority? Tagle's secret, which he bears, could be the last hope for the church or its worst danger. However, one fact stays unshakable. Francis didn't just make a lasting impression, he planted a seed, and it's developing in the billions of hearts. The last query, deep, eerie, relentless echoes. Will Francis's flame be allowed to burn brightly, or are we going to allow it to flicker in the darkness? Now, rise from all sides of the globe and respond by taking action for Francis, for the sake of humanity and the future worth.